Akira is a very important film, not only to anime in general, but also to me. Akira is not only the film that actually got me back into anime, but also one I watched a lot when I was younger. For the video, I'll be taking a look at the original manga home video dub instead of the 2002 redub, as the manga dub is what I watched the most. Akira is a 1988 cyberpunk science fiction action anime that is an incredibly loose adaptation of the manga it was based on of the same name. While it takes characters, events, and other such things from its source material, a lot of the story and side characters are completely lost or ignored in translation. While it does its best to adapt the incredibly long manga, it just doesn't always work out in a narrative sense. It also doesn't help that the Akira manga was still in the works and didn't officially end until 1990. Akira takes place after the Third World War, with peace finally being achieved after a strange beam of white light detonated in Tokyo in 1988, setting the world into conflict. Set in 2019, our story follows a cast of several factions of characters made up of politicians, military personnel, resistance fighters, and our main protagonist of the film, a young group of biker punks who get caught up in the brewing post-apocalyptic conflict. I hesitate to full-on call any of our main cast heroes, because while they aren't horrible people, they don't really ever take on the role of a hero itself. Most of the film, Kaneda, our protagonist, is just doing things because he either wants to or is motivated by the closest thing we have to a hero, the female rebel Kei. Our villain, outside of corrupt politicians and the ambiguous telekinetic telepathic children, is the mentally broken Tetsuo. Tetsuo starts off the film as a slightly abused and bullied friend of Kaneda and the group, and throughout the film turns into a god complex field superpowered psychopath. Don't get me wrong, I didn't hate any of the main cast, as I liked most of them, and they still did try to do what they could in the end for the better. It's more of the fact that outside of their few motivators and a scene at the end, we don't get a whole deal of sticking character personality or traits. Let me be honest, the story is kind of a mess when it isn't focusing on action scenes, beautiful visuals, or Tetsuo slowly dipping more and more into insanity. It has story beats that randomly disappear then reappear later in the film, and while it isn't completely incoherent, it can be a bit hard to follow if you aren't paying attention to all the background details and words being spoken. The film is already 2 hours long, but a few parts here and there have a bit of a drag to them. I do admire their efforts for doing as good a job as they did delivering the end product, but they probably should have cut some of the pseudoscience and philosophy talk to save on time. If I had to sum up the story, and I do for this video of course, it would basically be that what starts off as a normal day in Neo-Tokyo for our group of street punks quickly turns into a story of corruption, prophecy of end times, and the rising up of youth and a new world. Sprinkle in lots of ultra-violence and body horror for good measure, and you get the basic understanding of what the overall plot is. The story may be a mess, but the animation is the farthest thing from that, still being one of the most beautifully animated and amazing looking films I have ever seen. It's up there with the likes of Pat Labor 2 in terms of just how darn good it all looks. The film has over 160,000 animation cells put into use, and they sure used every darn one of them to make the film look as good as it possibly could be. Even if what is happening narratively in a scene is a bit boring, the animation will still keep your attention glued to the screen. The use of colors, framing of scenes and shots, and the spectacle of it all is just basically an orgasm of quality animation. From vehicle designs to clothing, down to what would normally be normal looking people, everything had an otherworldly yet casual feel to how it looked and its overall design. I'm still amazed at just how fluid everything on display is, as nothing felt choppy or slow. It was smooth like butter and made my eyes feel great while seeing everything happen. Standout moments were the opening bike chase around the streets of Neo-Tokyo, and of course the final showdown with Tetsuo and Kaneda. But when your film is almost all standout moments visually, it is kind of hard to choose anything outside of the most iconic moments and shots. Whether it be watching it on the original VHS home video release or on the restored Blu-ray, either way keeps the picture intact perfectly. The action scenes in the movie are a bit of a drive-by each time they happen. They get set up, and while there is definitely some great payoff to them in terms of on-screen violence, my only problem with them is sometimes they get cut away before it really gets into the stride of the carnage. I know that the film isn't going for a full-on action vibe, but when you get soldiers with laser rifles fighting a superpowered god team, I kinda wish we got more scenes of that happening than the characters just standing around and talking. When we do get to see a fully fledged scene of things going down, gosh, it reawakens my teenage self. The scenes where there are bike chases were some of my favorite scenes in the entire movie, and when Tetsuo faced off against the military, the standoffs were cool, even if they went down similarly each time. The film is pretty darn gory when it wants to be, and not just when it decides it wants to be a gross body horror film. Most encounters and scenes end with at least someone spurting a leak of the red stuff, and when things really get going, the body and limb count gets to be pretty darn high. The soundtrack of the film was equal parts parts entrancing and confusing, but it never sounded bad to listen to. A few of the songs sounded a bit odd, but do fit the feeling and tone. Stuff like the song that sounds like it has a bunch of gasping sounds, for example. Now, like I said, I am listening to the original dub of the film, and most people say this dub is horrible and cheesy, and while it hasn't aged well and is pretty darn goofy sounding, I actually don't hate it like most do. It's not great, but it has this odd charm that I really do admire. Maybe it's nostalgia, but I also personally can never get into the redub, even if it does have what the characters are saying make a bit more sense and sync up with the lip movements a bit more. It really all comes down to preference with the two different dubs, and thankfully the Blu-ray comes with both, and of course the original Japanese. My only gripe with the manga dub is that sometimes it can be kind of hard to understand what certain characters are saying, mainly due to the lack of context in the setting. Everything else from the sounds of motorcycles to gunfire to all that jazz sounds really darn good, and I didn't have any problems with the sound effects. And with all that said, while it does have the fault of having a muddled story, Akira is still an amazing ride that anyone, whether you are an anime fan or a film buff, should check out and watch. It still stands as one of my favorite films, in terms of anime and non-anime, and is still something I look upon fondly. It's an absolutely eye-pleasingly good time that is incredibly important to cinema in general. Throw in a lot of fun and a brisk pace that only gets slowed down for a few moments here and there, and you get one heck of a fun cyberpunk adventure. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider sharing with your friends or checking out my Patreon linked in the description below. A big thank you to the show's patrons, Project Nova and Gemstar Gold. If you have anything you'd like me to review or any comments in general, let me know down below. This is Theodore Williamson signing off until next time, and wishing everyone a wonderful year. See you guys!